Good morning. Welcome to hour number 2 of the Art Lewis Show. Today we are going to talk about, among other things, literacy and the literacy gap in schools. We have a number of folks with us this morning. First of all, returning for another visit, Mr. Positive himself, the one and only Paul White. Good morning.
Wonderful morning, everyone. What a privilege to be here.
Paul is responsible for my guests this morning because he brought them and introduced me to them. So why don't you introduce them and tell us how you came in contact with them, Paul?
Yeah, it's a great story. I got associated with Pamela Good, who is the founder and director, executive director of Beyond Basics, and her website, beyondbasics.org. It's a group, and there's a fantastic story of how it became what it is. Just an incredible story that I'd like to share in a little bit here.
Okay.
But Pam began this organization because she saw a need, figured out a solution, and then implemented the solution. And it's making big impact changes to the literacy of the kids in our state, and it's really the grades 6 through 12.
So we say good morning to Pam Good. Pam,
yes. Good morning.
Thanks
what a
for
pleasure
being
to be
with us.
here.
Thank you. Great to have you. And you brought someone with you, so introduce your guest.
Yes, I did. So this is Katie Neinstedt. She heads up all of our programs and school locations around the state and development areas, and she's just has a heart for this work and drives really hard, like all of us at Beyond Basics, to get kids reading. Actually, in an average of six weeks, we get grade level movement. So happy to introduce her and have her here today.
Katie, good morning.
Thank you for having us.
Sure,
We're
absolutely.
thrilled to share our story.
So I have to ask, we hear literacy all the time. Mm-hmm. What constitutes literacy? At what level do you have to read at what age to be considered literate?
Right. So there are really two main measures. We hear about the third grade reading level. At third grade, it means that you can sound out a syllable word, maybe 2-syllable words. And that's functional literacy. When you're able to read at a third grade level, you can, read signs at the grocery store, some common words.
Oh, you can read them. You started out by saying sound out, which
yes,
to me means enunciate or speak.
Yes, but it is just single syllable words. Proficiency is measured at 7th grade, and that means that you could sound out a word regardless of how many syllables, how long it is, and you could sound it out correctly. Now, what's hidden in some communities is that if you don't have a vast vocabulary, you may be able to sound out a word and not know it. So that's where you get comprehension, right? So those 3 measures, we want every child to be reading proficiently, at least at that 7th grade, and then we need to build their vocabulary after that.
And how much is comprehension included in this? And the reason I say that is I can read a lot of words and I have no idea what they mean.
Yes. Well, it's important that, one, we have children that are in K-12 that can't sound out words. So they see a long word and they don't even know how to pronounce it. So that is the crisis in America. After you know how to read, then building vocabulary and comprehension, that means understanding about what you read, is really the next goal. And so depending on where you are and which city you grew up in and which family you're raised in, you have different levels of vocabulary and comprehension. But we want to raise those levels for kids that don't have the same life experience as others.
So if, and this is a word I hate to use, but I'm going to use it anyway, if we assume for a moment that most youngsters of kindergarten age go to school and proceed through the grades, why are we losing the literacy battle?
Well, the universities in the early 80s started implementing a new program, really. And this is just one component, but a huge component. They went to a whole language approach instead of a phonics-based, like we all learned. And so the teachers started graduating out of that method and becoming teachers. And so, education really just teaches reading at K3. But we've had a few decades now where children have been not taught in those early years, and they continue to go through school and graduate as non-readers.
But I do have to ask this, just because it's the way I learned. And correct me if I'm wrong. Katie, let me ask you this. If you teach reading by phonics, are you failing spelling?
No. I mean, kids have to learn how to sound out words. That's foundational. So we always say that kids learn to read K through 3, and then 4 through 12, they're reading to learn. So that's when it all starts to
But when do they
expand.
learn to spell? Because phonics can destroy your ability to spell.
Well, I think that you start by learning phonics because you've got to be able to sound out the word. But then your further reading and study at grade level study at each level teaches you, how to actually read the words and know the sounds. So
Yeah.
it's
So-
a progression. It's a progression.
So where, I have to ask again, though, where is education failing if we're having all of these youngsters who are not literate at their grade levels?
Well, I think it's twofold. One, education started teaching kids to read by third grade. It used to be that the children read by third grade. We have no classes that are automatic for kids in 4th through 12th grade to teach them to read if they missed it. So that's one component of it. But the teachers are not given the tools of phonics. So you have some decisions being made at the upper levels of education that have really gotten in the way of teachers being able to have the tools they need to teach kids.
Whatever happened to the basic principle of reading, writing, arithmetic?
Yes, I know. That's how our, do you know, you probably know many people only graduated at 8th grade. They'll tell you they graduated 8th grade and they can do anything in life. Unfortunately, now we have kids staying in through 12th grade, not being able to read, and it sends them on a path, and in some cases, incarceration, unemployment, social service the rest of their lives. So we have gone so far backwards from those early days, because if you can read and you have an 8th grade education, in our world today, you could do almost anything you wanted.
Well, you still have to learn a trade, but you have the,
Yeah,
you
but
have
you
the
have
ability
you have
to
the
do
ability to move forward. Yes, those possibilities are open to you when you can read.
it. And you're sitting over there bobbing your head, Paul. So
Well, there's a couple of things. They're going to be building in Hemlock a new factory, correct?
yeah.
How many jobs is that bringing to the area?
Well, it's gone up now. Corning is going to be looking for 1,500.
1,500
Hemlock
jobs.
Semiconductor's looking for a couple of hundred right now. SK Siltron and Bay City's looking for a couple of hundred, and these are all
So we've got
skilled-
2,000
Roughly,
good-paying
yeah,
jobs
yeah.
that people
Skilled.
can. Yeah, and where are those people going to come from? And are we producing the people? And this is really interesting because we have the people. We may not have them able to achieve success that would allow them to step into a job like that. And literacy many times is the problem. Now, we also know that there's issues. How about food scarcity? How about, safe homes and everything? So we know that there's a lot of environmental factors that can impact this, and we need to work on those too. But reading is so critical
the old
to
saying,
success. And-
reading is fundamental. I mean, that was
Right.
the old saying, right?
Right. That was years ago. That was a common saying that we heard on television commercials.
Because
and
I'm old
everything.
enough to remember it, Paul. That's-
Well, and think about when you were talking about phonics. All I could think of, there was a comedian, Gallagher,
Yeah.
who used to have this chart, and he would go through words. And the English language makes it so hard from a spelling standpoint. And he'd say, okay, so this word should be spelled this way, just like this one was, and it'd be a completely different spelling.
All right, I got to take a break. We'll come back with our guests as we talk about literacy, and we'll learn more about Beyond Basics when we return here on the Art Lewis Show. Let me take a moment to talk about Krysiak's House Family Restaurant in Bay City, the best place to go for your authentic home-cooked foods with a European flair at reasonable prices. Now's the time to think about getting together with friends and family for lunch or dinner, as well as events coming up soon like graduations and confirmations and weddings, showers, anniversaries. Krysiak's has an economical way for you to supply the food. Now, you can order what you want in Polish and American foods and pick it up at the restaurant ready to go, or better yet, have your celebration right there. Don't forget, at a moment's notice, Krysiak's can help. Call them at 989-894-5531, 894-5531. Krysiak's House Family Restaurant, corner of Cass in Michigan, on Bay City's south side.
Hey, it's Mike Rowe, and if you
All right, we're back with you, and a number of guests in studio with us. Paul White, our Mr. Positive, as I call him, has brought us a couple of guests this morning. We have Pam and Kate with us. Pam Good is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Beyond Basics, Literacy for Everyone at beyondbasics.org. So tell us why this came about, Pam. I mean, what was your background? Were you a teacher?
No, I wasn't a teacher. I was a mom at the time being. I had kids in elementary school. I had a business background, graduated from U of M. Had child development background.
Right.
Yeah. No. Yes.
Be a good thing or a bad thing.
Yes, we won't hold that against us, right? But anyway, I delivered coats to a school on behalf of my son's elementary school community service project, and I took the Joy Road exit to Herman Rogers Academy. People know it as the Herman Gardens area. And after touring around that school, dropping off those coats, I said, Lord, they need more than coats. And I left there that day saying I would do more. And I think when it aligns with what God wants to do anyway, he gives opportunity for you to make good on that. And so there were some things that encouraged me to take some of our kids from the suburban school and publish books with kids in the inner city, and that sparked Beyond Basics, where initially we provided academic enrichment programs that led to us finding out they couldn't read, and then we worked on solving that.
And you gave me some sheets here. These particular sheets had to do with the Bay City and Midland County school districts.
Yes.
And these are not pleasing numbers, because this indicates a rather significant level of, I don't know, is illiteracy the right word?
Yes.
They're not illiterate,
well,
but
they're
not
proficient,
readers.
but they're not readers.
Yeah.
They definitely aren't readers. And, as we go into the schools and we assess kids, I mean, you have kids in high school today that are reading below a third grade level. That's hard to believe, which means they don't even know the sounds of the alphabet.
How do they graduate?
Well, there's not a requirement that you know how to read to graduate from high school.
Isn't that interesting?
It is interesting.
How do you do that? I mean, well, when I went to school way back then, if you chose to take an academic course as opposed to industrial learning, you were required to take English, and you were required to take all the basics because you were college prep. I couldn't have graduated if I didn't read. They wouldn't have allowed it. What's changed?
I don't know in terms of the rules when they changed, but I do know there's no requirement now that you prove that a child can read proficiently for graduation. And I think that I think that they believe the children have these learning differences that inhibit them, and then they've made a way to educate them as best they can. But what we have found is that every child, regardless of the reason, dyslexia or autism or ADHD or English language learners or you never learned in the beginning, everyone can learn to read, and that's why we embed better programs in the schools during the school day. The state gave us a grant a couple years ago that we've just completed to show that in 10 counties around the state, we find the same thing. Kids who can't read, like here in Bay City and Midland, and within an average of 6 to 10 weeks, an hour a day, we're able to get them reading.
So what does Beyond Basics do?
That's what we do. We find the money.
It's funny how that all comes into
Find
play.
the money. You know, we were philanthropically funded up until 2021. Then there was a literacy lawsuit in Detroit that opened up some dollars, and they made us a vendor. We're still a vendor today. But it's either philanthropic or public dollars that fund this, title dollars. We're in the parochial, the charters, mostly public schools around the state. And so what we say now is there is a solution. It's been proven out. It's been proven to scale. And we have a plan for how in this nation, Michigan could really become the beacon of light for literacy, because we've already
It's a
started
long
this
way to go.
deep work. But there's a plan in place, and that's that other map that I gave you, that if we divide the kids in 6th through 12th grade that are non-proficient, that we could really have them in any district, reading 100% proficiency in anywhere from 2 to 5 years.
So, do you teach the kids or do you teach the teacher?
Our operational model is that we meet with the principal or the superintendent and we identify students on their roster in their schools that are below in literacy proficiency, and they know who these children are. So we establish a classroom within the school. The schools have to welcome us, and they usually do very nicely. We set up our own space. It's the Beyond Basics classroom, which gives us some clout within the school. We work with the administrative staff on student scheduling, and we pull students into our classroom in the regular school day for 1 hour a day with the same tutor, one-on-one. So it's a very unique approach.
It's a one-on-one approach.
So we're training tutors and sending them into the classroom. And then the teachers, we welcome them in to, if they want to go through some of our training, we welcome them in. But we are training individuals, creating a workforce in communities, and they go into that classroom inside the school, and they're paired with those kids, as Katie described.
You had your hand up, Mr. White. You may not leave the room, but you can speak.
I'm going to come at this from a positive standpoint. You mentioned the data, and when you look at the data, it can be troubling if you think about it that way. But the great news is we look at the data. I say we, Beyond Basics looks at the data and says, wow, there's so much opportunity here. There's hope. There is encouragement. And there's inspiration that we can make a change. And that's one of the greatest things I've learned in studying what Beyond Basics does, is that Pam saw a challenge and it bothered her. And she said, I'm going to do something about it. So she came up with a program, instituted that program by taking action, and then over time had the results from that program, the positive results that said, we can take this model anywhere and achieve the same positive results. And so what we're hoping by being here today with your help and support and your listeners, which we just appreciate so much, is that they would sit there and say, we can do better. And I want to get involved in that, and that they would take some form of action. And the tutors that Beyond Basics uses are actually paid. They start at $20 an hour. And so this is a win-win for people that want to become tutors, which range anywhere from kids in college to retirees and stuff. But what Pam has found and her organization has found, this supports the teachers. This doesn't compete with the teachers. This doesn't compete with curriculum. This is a path to everyone winning. And it makes the teacher's job easier, because when they have students at grade level reading,
Oh, yeah, obviously.
they can do what their dream always was, to teach.
All right, we're going to take a break, come back, more ahead as we talk about literacy and beyond basics.
My name is Kim Harris.
And we are back with you, our guests in studio, as we talk about literacy and beyond basics, a company designed to attack the problem and find solutions, headed by Pamela Good. She is president, chief executive officer of the company. Kate is with us, one of the educators, and Paul White, who was the motivator, is with us this morning. I do have to ask, and I keep coming back to it, because in Michigan, for example, we spend all this money on education and we end up at the bottom of the barrel.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we going wrong in the educational system to allow this literacy to happen?
Yes.
Is the teachers don't know how to teach it? What are we missing here?
Well, the universities went to a whole language approach. We mentioned it before. We are like 44th in the country in education. But we are all at the bottom when it comes to literacy. The number one state in education in America right now is Massachusetts, and they only can claim 40% proficiency for 8th graders. So when it comes to literacy, everybody's at the bottom, and it's the reason that we have to do this work.
But if universities went to this whole language model, and it's taken time to get these results to where they are today, which are not good, why aren't the universities smart enough to say, now we're going to change this and go back to the phonetics?
It's been in the news the last few years, and there was a lawsuit about 5 or 6 months ago, a couple of parents against the founders of Whole Language and against Columbia University. Somehow they're connected there. But they really are still defending Whole Language, even though there's so much science around the fact that phonics is really what kids need in the beginning. And so that's a battle, but I'm just thrilled that we can get kids reading at grade level and get grade level movement in an average of 6 weeks. We see the numbers now.
But what are you doing different?
We are assessing the kids one-on-one. We are tutoring them one-on-one, an hour a day, 5 days a week during the school day for the most part. And we are using a phonics-based curriculum. Once they know how to read, then they can now access the curriculum that's being offered in the classroom. And so that is the solution right there. Most people want to do it in small groups. They want to do it with a normed assessment. You have to follow that gold star standard of reading proficiency.
So, Kate, when a student comes to you, you sit down with that student. Are they willing participants? Do they understand why?
For the most part, and we try to make it as appealing as we can. But the initial assessment lets us know exactly where that student is. The one-on-one tutoring provides a very safe space for that student to really reveal where they are, as opposed to a classroom setting. The tutor works with the student, starts exactly where that student needs to start, and then can go as quickly as that student can move, stay where they need to stay, and a relationship is built, a relationship of trust, because it is the same tutor with the same student.
And I would add that once these children start learning, because they haven't been put in a situation where they're actually learning to read. They're in situations where what they're being delivered doesn't work. When they see that they're learning to read, you have their full attention, because they go out in the world and now all the letters they see everywhere. Until you get to read, you are blind to words.
So what do you use to assess a third grader's ability to read? See dog run, see spot jump. What are we using to test that third grader?
So remember, we do tutor older kids also. Mm-hmm. So we give them an initial test that lets us know how many words they can read in a minute. And it lets us know if they have the foundational skills. If they don't, we're going back and we're seeing how many sounds of letters they know. So there's a number of tests. There's a Woodcock Reading Mastery. There's Read Naturally, ReadWorks. There's different tools that we use to establish where you are in reading. And unfortunately, we have high school kids that we test often that are reading at a second or third grade level.
And then that same assessment tool is used after we've completed our tutoring prescription.
Reassess.
Yes.
So we can then go back to the principal who invited us into the school and said, here are the students we work with, here's where they started, and here's where they finished. And even before we have that meeting, we're getting feedback from the staff and the principal. The student is better behaved. The student is more engaged, because as they're moving through our program, they're feeling safer and more secure and able to access the curriculum at their grade.
And again, I'm not an educator, but if I'm that principal in that school and you come to me and you show me those results, I'm going to say, teach my teachers, please.
Yes, and so what we find, the real scores that the superintendents and principals want to see is that their own state tests show improvement. And what we have found and what surprises these superintendents is that where they expect 4 points of growth in their states, they're getting 21, 35, because a child has that 4 points of growth in every academic class that they're tested in. And so they get 2 to 3 grade levels of growth academically on their own assessments. So we do assess the reading, but what they really want to see is their own scores go up.
Paul, do you have thoughts?
You know, a few minutes ago, you asked the question, so what is going wrong? And respectfully, Art, because you know I love you, I would say that's the wrong question. And while we're aware of the challenges, our mind is like, we have a solution. How do we implement the solution that's going to move us forward? So we're not as concerned, because if you ask, where are we going wrong, we could light up the call lines here for the next 2 weeks.
And you know, Paul, that I love you back.
Yes.
You cannot solve a problem unless you first determine the problem. That is why I say, where do we go wrong?
And that's why I said we're aware of the problem, but we've done enough research to know that we have a solution that works. And at the Bay
you
City
haven't
Morning Rotary Club
Yep.
this morning, they talked about how really K through 5, they're doing great.
Yeah.
And Beyond Basics kicks in the 6 through 12. Am I right?
Well, that's the state plan, because right now you have almost 700,000 kids in Michigan that are below proficiency.
To which I would say the state
And-
plan is a failure.
Well, it is a failure, but the triage plan moving forward so that we can have every child reading in the next 5 years is to let educators take care of K-5. They're already focused on the K-3. They're already implementing a phonics-based curriculum, which we're thrilled that the governor's gone in that direction, and they're following it. We say, let partners like Beyond Basics come in and work with 6th through 12th.
All right. I got to take a break, and we'll come back to that, and we'll find out how they can get Beyond Basics into the classroom. All ahead.
Jeff Gronsky here with Auto Bright.
USGW, the Art Lewis Show, as we talk about literacy and how we're looking to solve and have a solution to the problem. The company is called Beyond Basics. Literacy is for everyone. Pamela Good, its president and CEO, is with us this morning. Kate, one of the instructors, and Paul White, who introduced us to him. So if a school system is interested in Beyond Basics, what's the procedure? What do they do to get in touch with you and contract you?
Yes. Well, they reach out to our website or phone number. The website is beyondbasics.org, and that's basics with an S. And then
Because you can't spell or read, folks.
BEYONDBASICS.org or 248-918-3543.
And then what happens?
And then we can talk to them about where they live and what their need is, and start the conversation in a community. I mean, we would love to see the congressional. You're in Congressional District 8. Is that right here in this community? Yes. There are just over 27,000 kids that are below proficient. We'd love to see that whole region come together and us identify those kids in the schools and work out a way that we can get each one of them reading. And so there is a plan for a solution. I believe Michigan can be that beacon of light for literacy. We know the recipe, and if we come together community by community, we will be able to look back on this problem in 3 to 5 years.
So how are you funded?
Philanthropically through the school's title dollars, and also the state of Michigan had given us that pilot grant. So private-public funding.
So, but schools